Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Well, let's start with Iran. And on a day that America promised its most intense strikes of the war so far, its forces have taken out 16 mine-laying boats near the Strait of Hormuz.
It's certainly been another fast-moving night, with Iran launching a new wave of strikes against Israeli and US targets, and Israel launching their own attacks on Hezbollah targets in Beirut.
And on top of that, a container ship has been hit by what's been described as an unknown projectile off the UAE coast.
Our US correspondent David Blevins has a full summary of all of the latest from Washington for us.
Eliminating the threat, the US boasting that it has completely destroyed multiple Iranian mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, while the self-styled Secretary of War plays down fears of a long campaign.
This is not endless, it's not protracted, we're not allowing mission creep. The president has set a very specific mission to accomplish. And our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. He's the one deciding, he's the one elected on behalf of the American people when we're achieving those particular objectives.
Iran says it's fighting back. These pictures from state television. One official warned Donald Trump to be careful he wasn't eliminated himself. But US troops are taking out Iranian missiles and warning that the most intense strikes are being composed.
This beautiful symphony of American spirit is the definition of perfectly organized chaos.
But here on Capitol Hill, that beautiful symphony, well, it sounds a bit out of tune. Democratic members of Congress left the latest classified briefing telling us they had more questions than answers.
It is solely the responsibility of the United States Congress to declare war. Make no mistake, this is Trump's war. He says it every day. They can couch it however they want.
The Trump administration cannot explain the reasons that we entered this war, the goals we're trying to accomplish, and the methods for doing them.
So, in 6 weeks' time, as stated last week, or very soon, when does the White House expect this to end?
Ultimately, the operations will end when the commander-in-chief determines the military objectives have been met, fully realized, and that Iran is in a position of complete and unconditional surrender, whether they say it or not.
But it's images like these, the latest dignified transfer of one of America's fallen, that will add to the urgency for a government that's now ending war briefings with a plea for divine intervention.
May the Lord grant unyielding strength and refuge to our warriors, unbreakable protection to them and our homeland, and total victory over those who seek to harm them. And amen.
David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, in a moment, we'll hear from Sally Lockwood. She's in Dubai for us once again. But first to our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's in Beirut this morning. John, what is the latest on the strikes specifically there?
Yeah, hi, Wilf. Only very sound sleepers would have got through last night here in Beirut. I think the southern suburbs of the city were pummeled by Israeli airstrikes. Israel says they're targeting Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities, and they have served 4 districts of the city with an evacuation order telling everybody to get out. But they also hit an apartment building very close, actually, to where we are standing. A great fireball went up over the city just before dawn. They've taken out 2.5 floors of this apartment building, and it looks like a targeted strike. It looks like an assassination attempt on the people inside those flats, inside those apartments. No evacuation order given, no warning. And the problem, obviously, with that is the people who live by, they're not alerted either. It seems very similar to a strike on the early hours of Sunday morning on a corner room at the Ramada Plaza Hotel. That's very close to here. In that case, the Israelis, they said they killed 4 senior commanders in that room who were commanders in Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. And Israel says that the Revolutionary Guard has people here acting as military advisors to Hezbollah. I think it just goes to show there really is no front line in this war in Lebanon.
And John, there's a UN resolution taking place today. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the UN has been marginalised, hasn't it? It's been pushed aside by the Trump administration. They certainly haven't shown any interest in using the system. The Iranian ambassador, he was criticizing the Security Council, which is the most powerful arm of the UN system, yesterday for turning a blind eye. He criticized it for its continual silence, and he actually used the attack on the Ramada Hotel as an example of that. He said that the Israelis had killed 4 Iranian diplomats in contravention of international law. The Security Council, though, is expected to be pressed into action again today. Gulf countries introducing a resolution to condemn Iran for its attacks on neighboring countries. But if that passes, and I don't think it will be, I think the Russians would probably veto it, but I think if it passed, the Iranians, they would ignore it. I would expect them to ignore it. I think that is the problem of the system, isn't it? It can be ignored.
John, thank you so much. Let's bring in Sally, shall we now, who's in Dubai for us. And Sally, can you tell us a bit more about this container ship that was struck by what's been described as a projectile in the Strait of Hormuz? It sounds a bit confusing. Do we know anything more about it?
Well, at the moment, we don't know the extent of the damage to the vessel, but it's understood it was damaged and the crew are safe. But it occurred just off the coast of the most northern emirate, Ras Al Khaimah, to the north of here, which normally has a much quieter coastline. It's got quite a buzzing tourism industry. People go there for weekends. And at the moment, that coastline has become a real flashpoint because Ras Al Khaimah, that northern emirate, is where the entry to the Strait of Hormuz is. And there are a number of vessels there just static in the water. We can even make out a number of ships just behind us here in Dubai that have been static for days because the Strait of Hormuz, as we've been talking about, is just effectively closed at the moment, and a number of vessels, container ships and tankers, have come under attack by what's been described as unknown projectiles, but we think most of those attacks have probably been drone attacks. We were up on the Strait of Hormuz just a few days ago. There was an explosion while we were there because vessels are being targeted, and as well as oil facilities in that area. It's a really, really tight, narrow waterway between here and Iran to the north, with so much shipping. Normally, it's a shipping superhighway, but it's essentially ground to a halt, and it's causing such a big impact on the global economy already. Although, speaking to analysts, they do say, if it's just a couple of weeks that we see this effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we can probably manage it. It will be painful, but we'll be able to get through it. If it's beyond that, then it's the worst case scenario that energy markets have been fearing because the Strait of Hormuz is so critical to the global economy. And the US military have also been targeting Iranian military vessels that they fear were planning on mining the Strait of Hormuz, which is another Iranian tactic. So yeah, this narrow waterway is controlled by Iran, and it's a very powerful weapon that they now have in this war.
And Sally, give us the latest on the Saudis as well, and what we've been hearing from them, because lots of moving parts there, including the fact that they do have other routes to the south and the west, I guess, to get oil out. But what have we heard from them in the last 24 hours?
Well, interestingly, a major Saudi oil field has been targeted by drones in the last 24 hours. The Saudi Ministry of Defense reporting that they intercepted, I think it was 5 drones heading for an oil field in quite a remote location of southeastern Saudi. But the oil field in question has the capacity to produce around 1 million barrels of crude oil a day in normal times, and targeting this sort of infrastructure is a different type of warfare. We've already seen this happen in Qatar. They have effectively shut down their liquefied natural gas production because of attacks by Iranian drones, and also because of this issue with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Oil producers in the Gulf, of which there are many, and they are massive, have had to pare down their output at the moment because they simply don't have anywhere to put their crude oil that they're producing. This is a really big deal, and it's a major flashpoint in this war. We're keeping a close eye on it, and certainly it's something the White House, we know, is keeping a close eye on as well.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, John.
Well, back here, a request by police to ban a pro-Iranian march in London on Sunday has been approved.
So the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood says that banning the Al-Quds March will prevent what she's described as the chance of serious public disorder, but it's obviously a big decision. We can talk now to Graham Stothard, who joins us now. So tell us a bit more about this.
Well, it comes after quite a lot of pressure from MPs, both Labour and Conservative. This is an annual event, and in the past it has been controversial. It's seen as quite a pro-Iranian event, but the organisers have always said it's actually more pro-Palestinian. But this year it's stoked particular controversy for obvious reasons, but also because the organisers expressed support for the Iranian regime, but also said expressed support for the late leader and admiration, calling him a rare role model who chose to stand on the right side of history. Now, it was due to take place this Sunday, but as you mentioned, Shabana Mahmood has now okayed a police request to ban the march. She added, should a stationary demonstration proceed, the police will be able to apply strict conditions. I expect to see the full force of the law applied to anyone spreading hatred and division instead of exercising their right to peaceful protest. Now, the Islamic Human Rights Commission, they're the group that organises the protest. They said in the past that it's always been peaceful. They've described the decision as politically charged. They've said that the Metropolitan Police have abandoned principles of trying to police without fear or favour. But the Met Police have said that actually the risk of unrest is just too great. They said that the context is so uniquely complex, the risks so severe that placing conditions on the protest will not be sufficient to prevent it from resulting in serious public disorder, running the risk of injury to members of the public, protesters, police officers and damage to property. Now, it's the first time a protest march has been banned since 2012. This isn't a normal thing to happen, although a static protest is due to go ahead. Of course, that will be really quite heavily policed, I imagine.
Great stuff, Graham. Thanks so much. Much appreciated. Now, a member of Iran's women's football team has changed her position on whether or not to accept the granted status that the Australian government gave the 7 members, I think, originally of the football team who are in Asia. Let's get to Nicole Johnson, who's standing by for us on this. Nicole, remind us of the decision that had taken place initially and the change that we've learned about in the last few hours.
That's right, Wilf. So it started earlier in the week with 5 of these Iranian female football players who'd been here for the Women's Asian Cup competition for about a month. At the last minute, 5 of them decided they wanted to stay in the country and they were granted asylum by the government. The big question, of course, was what would the rest of the team and the squad do? And it seemed that they were all going to head back. And we know that they're now in Malaysia waiting for another flight. But then this morning we found out that another 2 of them had decided to join the 5. And the government in Australia told us that they had managed to get some of the women or all of the women, as it turns out, away from their minders at the very last minute, really as they were going through customs and immigration leaving Australia, and offered them the chance to stay in Australia. So 2 decided to stay, but then only a few hours ago we found out that one of them had changed their mind. And really it goes to show what an incredibly difficult, complicated and fraught process this whole thing has been, and how hard the decision has been for them as well. But look, let's take a listen to what Australia's Immigration Minister had to say about it.
I think we need to remember this. When those players were silent at the start of their first match in Australia, that silence was heard as a roar all around the world. And the world wanted to know, and Australians wanted to know, how we would respond. We responded by saying the invitation is there. In Australia, you can be safe, you will be welcomed, you will be at home.
And now another twist to this story, Wilf, is that when that Iranian football player called the Iranian embassy to say that she changed her mind and she wanted to go home, that then let the embassy know where all of these other women were being kept. And they were being kept in a safe house somewhere in the country. So since then, the government has moved the other women. So it's really been a pretty problematic story how this whole thing has played out. But the women have captured the hearts of Australians and people overseas, and people really sort of relate to, well, not relate, but empathise with this huge decision they're having to make, whether or not they'll stay in Australia or return to their country and their family, even while it's in the middle of a war.
Nicole, thank you very much indeed.
Now, before we get to the conversation with the government this morning, let's have a look at what the markets are doing this morning in light of the Iranian war. And it's a little bit calmer once again today. If we look at oil prices, first of all, here is the oil price chart for the last year once again. And we're trading at about $87.40 this morning for Brent crude. As you can see, we spiked really aggressively and we've come back over the course of the last couple of days. I think the levels, just to remind ourselves of, we started the year in January at about $60. We started the war at about $73. So we'd already risen sort of 20-25% before the war even started. And we spiked up to 115 at late Sunday night, Monday morning. We've pared back since then. It's still worth pointing out that even though we're not at the peak, from the start of the year, we're still up 44%, which is quite significant, of course, for an economy to take in its stride, albeit not as bad as it was. Also worth pointing out that overnight, the scale of military exchanges has been quite pronounced once again. The Strait of Hormuz is still very much all but closed, and yet we've come back from the peak of those spikes. We'll see if that maintains or not. If we look at a chart now of the two-year government borrowing costs, it's kind of a similar shape to the chart. We're well off the highs, which was only very brief. We got up to about 4.2% on the UK two-year borrowing cost early on Monday morning. But we're still quite a lot higher than where we started the course of this war. We were down at 3.5% about a week or two ago, spiked to 4.2 very briefly, and we're settling here at about 3.8, 3.9%. Reminder, the Bank of England base rate is 3.75%, so not really pointing here to much change going forward. I think the key point, Sophie, to say on this is that we're not expecting rate hikes now, but I don't think the market is confident of rate cuts either.
Wilf, guiding us through the roller coaster that has been the last few days, it has to be said. And someone else who knows an awful lot about this as well, our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, who'll be with us again. That's not Professor Michael Clark, apologies. That is Darren Jones. Let's go straight to Darren Jones. Yeah, that would be praise indeed. Professor Michael Clark, who is our military analyst supremo. Yeah. He will be coming up later, but first, I'm glad to say, we've got Darren Jones. Good to have you with us. Lots to talk about with Iran. But first, I just hoped you might be able to confirm the Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson files expected to be released today, is that correct?
The first tranche will be published to Parliament this afternoon, and I'll be giving a statement to the House at that time. Yeah,
and look, I'm not going to waste loads of time asking you about it, because I know it's better to ask questions after we've seen what's in them. But how many should we expect? What should we be looking at?
So look, it's a big number of documents. Government takes its responsibility to be transparent to Parliament really seriously, and of course, on this issue of Peter Mandelson and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, we all have a shared interest in bringing some accountability and transparency to these issues. So the first tranche will be published this afternoon. A second tranche, though, will come later because there's been further work that we've had to do across government in response to the humble address, which is not quite ready. And we have two other processes that take a bit of time, given the live criminal investigation with the Metropolitan Police and the role of the Intelligence and Security Committee in Parliament that has some oversight of it.
When you say later, is this like a few days later, a few months later, or you have no idea?
The second tranche, I mean, it's probably in the weeks, but we're trying to get through it as quickly as possible. It just needs those approvals from the committee and from the Met Police before we can then come back to Parliament with them.
Makes sense. Helpful that it's been released just after Prime Minister's questions, so the Prime Minister doesn't have to face questions on it?
Well, I mean, Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons every Wednesday. I mean, it's just normal scheduling in the House of Commons that statements come after PMQs on a Wednesday. But we have committed to Mr. Speaker that they will be published very promptly so that members get the chance to read them before I stand up so that they can ask me any questions about them.
So you've got the tough job then, not the Prime Minister, basically.
Always happy to do my job.
Let's talk about Iran, if we may. 3 US bombers took off from a UK airbase yesterday. They were about defensive strikes in Iran. What are defensive strikes? How do we, describe what's a defensive strike and what isn't?
Yeah, well, firstly, it's a really important question because the permission for the Americans to use our air bases here at RAF Fairford, but also in Diego Garcia, was that any operations out of those bases must be defensive and not part of the wider war in the Middle East. What that practically means is that the Americans are trying to bomb the launchers that the Iranian regime have in order to fire missiles out indiscriminately across the region, which is where hundreds of thousands of British citizens are. So RAF planes have been in the sky shooting the missiles down that have already been launched, but the Americans will go into Iran to bomb the launchers to reduce their ability to fire those missiles.
And HMS Dragon finally setting off from Portsmouth.
Yeah.
RAF Akrotiri was attacked almost a week, more than a week ago, I think it is now. What took so long?
Well, we had RAF assets in the region for many, many weeks, and we take responsibilities in Cyprus very seriously. HMS Dragon was in maintenance at the time that this conflict happened in the Middle East. And I have to say, hats off to the team there, because they ended up finishing what was programmed to be 6 weeks' worth of work in 6 days, including getting all the kit on the ship they needed to put on before they could set sail. So they've gone as quickly as they can, but it's right that we send further assets down there, given the risk to Cyprus.
And I'm sure, I'm not an expert on this stuff, it feels like a long time, over a week, when you have a UK military base with a drone, seemingly from Russia, landing on the runway. Do you not accept that?
Yeah, look, from the Navy perspective with HMS Dragon, of course, when it was put into maintenance, we didn't know this was going to happen in the Middle East. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I'd say our RAF capabilities, those F-35s, those Typhoons...
You didn't know what was happening in the Middle East, but the world was, I think it's fair to say, we did know that the world was in a pretty precarious and dangerous spot, right?
For sure, and our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent continues, and our aircraft carriers have been out at sea. But I say those Merlin helicopters with anti-drone capabilities, those Typhoons and F-35s, they were there in the region already doing important work.
I want to talk about this ban, the march that we have. So the Home Secretary have agreed to ban a march which many believe is in support of the Iranian regime. It's due in London on Sunday. These powers haven't been used since 2012, which I think underlines what a serious move this is.
Yeah.
Do you accept that some people will say, the whole right to freedom of speech is the right to say things that are deemed, offensive or that you might vehemently disagree with?
Yes, you can't do anything illegal. You can't incite hatred or violence or cause physical damage and those types of things. But you do have the right in our country to express your views democratically and peacefully. And that's why these powers are not used very often, because even when people might feel uncomfortable about what people are campaigning on, they're allowed to do so. But the Met Police had requested this, having looked at the operational detail of it. They requested it of the Home Secretary.
So it came from it's not nothing to do with the government, really. It was a Met Police request, is what you're saying. What is in the gift to the government is considering whether certain groups are terrorist or not. Is there a case for the IRGC, the Iranian military, to be designated as a terrorist organisation?
Yeah, look, there's been a long-running debate on this, and it's something the government keeps under review. It's a very legal and technical process that you can't really comment on about very much in the media. It has to be something that would come to Parliament if the government were deciding to do that. But powers have been strengthened to deal with lots of these issues, including on protests, the kind of cumulative impact of protests.
So you're saying that you can't, something's going on that you can't tell us about, is that?
All I'm allowed to say is that the government keeps these things under review.
OK. And then just finally, I was hoping to talk about courts, because the justice reforms passed, cleared one of the big parliamentary hurdles yesterday. Part of this would be cutting the number of jury trials. But I just wanted to talk to you about what one Labour MP specifically said, Charlotte Nichols, and I'm sure you'll be aware.
Yeah.
She decided to waive her anonymity as a victim of rape. And she said the government's been weaponising victims. She said that they've been using them as a cudgel to drive through changes. And she talked about the importance of a safety net of a jury trial. I was very moved by what she said. I thought it was very, very powerful. She got a point.
So, look, the first thing to say is that Charlotte's a friend and a colleague of mine, and her speech yesterday in the House of Commons was very powerful, and no doubt would have been personally very difficult for her. And I'm sure that, victims of rape and sexual abuse will have seen her giving them a voice. So I don't want to undermine that in any way whatsoever. On the substance of the argument, the government, following the independent review by Brian Levinson, has come forward and said that because there's such a backlog that we've had since COVID on jury trials, there's only so much capacity for juries and judges for these types of hearings. people are not getting their day in court quickly enough. And so if you can take out some of the cases that don't essentially need juries, you free up the capacity for the most serious crimes to be able to get to court.
I think part of Charlotte's point is that the government is, which you're not saying you have, but the government has constantly said the reason we're doing this is to help people like, for example, rape victims get a speeding up of the process. You know, numerous ministers have said that sitting in the same chair as you. And Charlotte's like, hang on a minute, you know, don't speak on all of our behalves.
Yeah, and I hear her, and I say I'm not going to challenge her on that at all. It wouldn't be right for me to do so. All I'm saying is that the substance of the argument is that if you free up capacity for that, for jury trials, for the cases that need them most, then you'll be able to get through them more quickly.
There was an awful lot of Labour MPs abstaining. Do you accept you need to do more to win them over?
Look, there's been a lot of engagement. I mean, it passed with a very clear majority in the House of Commons, but some of these things are contentious, and that's what the House of Commons is about.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Darren Jones speaking to us there. Coming up, we'll be talking a little bit more about the release of the Mandelson documents that we were just discussing there. Don't go anywhere.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. Now, this is a decision that's been welcomed by dozens of families. Senior midwife Donna Ockenden has been named as the chair of an investigation into maternity services in Leeds.
The inquiry is going to examine the deaths of 56 babies and 2 mothers over the last 5 years at Leeds General Infirmary and St James's Hospital.
We're 10 days out from my daughter's 4th birthday, and I've been at this now for 4 years, and to have that taken out of our hands a little bit and know it's in good hands is a huge relief. My daughter, she is buried, she's not coming back, but my gift to her is stopping other children dying in the same way for no reason, and that's really important.
Well, Donna's here with us now, I'm delighted to say. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
How long has this been in the pipeline, and how well, pleased isn't kind of the right word for any of this, but how relieved are you that we've gotten to this point?
So, talking to the families last night, they are absolutely relieved that we've got to this point where they feel they have a chair of the maternity review at Leeds that they can trust. I think we would all recognise it took too long. Families have been making the request for me repeatedly now for well over a year. But I think what is also important, and this is what the families were saying to me last night, is we are here now. We are grateful that Wes Streeting, as Secretary of State, listened and made the right decision ultimately.
So he's got there in the end, basically, is the synopsis.
He did get there, and he got there after a lot of really careful listening.
If you don't know Donna, by the way, I feel like I should just kind of give you a bit of a flavour of who this woman is, because she is a queen, if you really, to be fair. She wouldn't say herself, but like when it comes to maternity care in the UK, something that, you know, on this programme we've covered an awful lot. You know, Donna is someone who's constantly been asking the difficult questions and listening to an awful lot of families. I don't know how you do it, if I'm being honest, because, you know, you just hear that woman there talking about, you know, the child that she's lost, and, you know, we've spoken to mums and dads who've lost children on this programme before as well. How do you keep going?
Well, that was Lauren, and Grace, her little girl, would be 4, I think now in 9 days' time. I think it's not about me, it's about the families who have been through the most unimaginable harm and live the consequences of that every day of the week. I have a responsibility to do my job, to complete my role to the best of my ability, and that is what I do every day. I'm well supported by some fantastic friends, family, colleagues. You know, so I look after myself so that I can look after others, I guess is how I'd sum it up.
How long do you expect something like this to take? And obviously critical to do it right, but important to get recommendations out and deliver the change that's needed.
So one of the things that we've done very successfully in Nottingham is on-the-go learning. So Nottingham are not waiting for, you know, a great big report to come out in June, which it will. They already know a lot of the things that they've got to do, you know, to keep improving their service. So having done that in Nottingham, we'll definitely do that in Leeds. At the moment, the outline is around 3 years to complete, but then we don't know the numbers. We know that this will be a large inquiry. Leeds is a very large maternity and neonatal service. We're still working on the terms of reference. So I've given a commitment. I'll work in the most timely way that I can, but at the same time with the Ockenden standard of thoroughness that everyone expects and families and staff on the ground deserve.
It's obviously so important to have these inquiries into hospitals where there have been these deaths, right?
Yes.
But it can feel like there are so many reviews, so many inquiries. We've had many before. We've had hundreds of recommendations before. We've got Baroness Amos going at the same time. Do we not just need things to change, as in action to happen, rather than things to be looked at again when we know what the problems are?
We absolutely do need action now, in the here and now. I think that these reviews, though, they have 2 separate focus, really. First of all, it's giving families answers. So perhaps one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is, well, why do families need to do this to get answers? Because clearly there is something wrong in the system. And then secondly, I think that there are perennial long-term problems within maternity services that are well known, that are well documented, and so action could be, should be, and must be taken now.
Just you said there about people feeling like they have to go through this kind of thing to get answers. And I'll be honest, when I've spoken to families, and I've had a lot of women in particular reaching out to me on social media, one of the frustrations has been that they feel that they've basically been a cover-up, I think is fair to say. That is what they would say. They feel that there's been no admission of guilt, no apology, and people not being honest with them about what happened to them and what they know happened to them.
I hear that all the time. I hear it across the country. You know, I know thousands of women and families from Nottingham, from Shrewsbury, but I've also had a huge amount of contact from across the country. And a theme is mothers are not listened to, fathers are not listened to, and that is something that's got to change, along with making sure actually that midwives, obstetricians, anaesthetists and so on do have the right resources to be able to give the care that the vast, vast majority of them want to give.
Obviously, you talked about Nottingham. This is for Leeds. I guess my follow-up question is, are there other specific locations that you'd be saying to the Health Secretary, make a similar decision for a review there? And is there a legitimate, I don't know if this is one of his reasons, but is there a legitimate point to say, well, look, there are some national reviews that are taking place and we should also let that run its course? Or do you think there are other specific locations that need a Leeds-like review?
Yes, there are. Sussex families have been asking for a Nottingham-style review into the deaths of their babies now for a considerable amount of time. Oxford, again, have very grave concerns and large numbers of families involved in their campaign. Yeah, there is a lot to do in maternity services, probably across the UK, but I can only really speak very well about England.
Mm-hmm. It's been great to talk to you, as always, Donna, and we will await your review and read through the details with interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, as we know, the royal family is being forced to fend off issues surrounding Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Well, the Queen expressed her solidarity with and sympathy with female survivors of violence and sexual abuse.
So Camilla warned that a culture of silence can empower violence against women and girls. It was a speech marking International Women's Day.
To every survivor of every kind of violence, many of whom have not been able to tell their stories, who have not been believed, please know that you are not alone. We stand with you, alongside you, today and every day, in solidarity, sorrow and sympathy. Every woman has a story, and these stories must be told. Because when we live in a culture of silence, we empower violence against women and girls.
I should say as well, you know, it's not the first time that the Queen Camilla, has spoken about violence against women and girls. She actually spoke about her own experience as well when she had to fend off an attempted sexual assault as a teenager as well. She fought off the attacker using the heel of her shoe, but it's clearly something that she's decided to speak up about, which we saw her, you know, highlighting on International Women's Day as well.
Yeah, really great to see the Queen there talking about that. Well, linked, of course, to so much of this is the Epstein files, and as we heard from Darren Jones, Number 10 will today release the first batch of what are being labelled the Mandelson files, documents about Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador. Those will be coming out later today. Of course, we should stress that Peter Mandelson denies any wrongdoing.
But it is, of course, as well a moment of jeopardy for Keir Starmer. Today, at least, though, he won't face questions about what he did or didn't know. The files are being released after PMQs. Darren Jones said he was happy to take the questions himself. Not sure how true that is, but there you go. Let's talk to Alex Rogers now, shall we, about this. So what are we expecting to see today?
So the first tranche of documents, but I think it's still quite unclear of how many there's going to be or what's going to be in them. I mean, Darren Jones was saying there was a big number of documents, but really there's a live police investigation going on, and there's also kind of national security considerations. So I think some of the most important things might be withdrawn at this stage. Maybe some more will come out a bit later, but I think the key thing, the most significant thing, is that it just drags up this row that, of course, nearly cost the Prime Minister his job just a month ago. Yeah,
I feel like on the timing, they've been relatively quick on this. I mean, I think the question is, obviously, what is and isn't held back. But again, there's an ongoing police investigation. I think it's you know, these things can often take longer and be less transparent. We remain to see, of course, exactly what does come out. This all comes out later today.
Yes, so expecting Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, to give a statement after PMQ, so probably around 12:30, maybe a bit after. So, yeah, we're waiting to see what he reveals. Yeah, and then Darren Jones said that they're hoping to release the next tranche in weeks rather than months. But, of course, as Wilf was saying, it really depends on other factors as well. Alex, thank you.
Let's have a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
The next few days will bring strong winds, showers and longer spells of rain with colder air moving in by Friday. It's windy out there now with coastal gales locally severe in the far northwest. England and Wales can expect a largely dry morning with sunny spells, but a few showers are likely, mainly in the south. Elsewhere, blustery showers will be more widespread, even prolonged across Scotland for a time. Heavy downpours will bring the risk of hail and thunder. Temperatures will be near average, but it'll feel colder due to the strong wind.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, coming up, we are going to be continuing our coverage of the war that is spilling out from Iran to other places in the region with a focus on Lebanon.
Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. The next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw two guys, two bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
But that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
We're rolling. I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes.
I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live.
They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Welcome back. Let's return to the war and, in particular, the violence that is taking place now in Lebanon. Hezbollah has reportedly killed 600 people and displaced 700,000 others. Need to get you a timeline of that over many years. Let's bring in our next guest, Sabrina Derham, Country Director of Lebanon at the Danish Refugee Council. Join us. Sabrina, thanks so much for joining us from Beirut. I guess, firstly, your snapshot take on the scale of attacks that Beirut in particular has been receiving in the last few days.
Good morning, yes. And over the last few days, we've really seen the security situation escalating in Lebanon. We have airstrikes, drone attacks happening across the country, happening in parts of Beirut that were usually considered safe. What this means is we have people fleeing their homes with very little notice. Evacuation orders come. people collect their family and have to flee in search of safety, looking just for a safe place to stay, either sometimes on the street or arriving at one of the shelters that's been set up in the last week.
And in terms of the capacity of those types of shelters, where does it stand?
So the shelters, they are often schools that are repurposed or public buildings, and we work closely alongside the government of Lebanon. But the services within the shelters are provided by organisations such as the Danish Refugee Council. So at the Danish Refugee Council, we have been providing mattresses, pillows, thermal blankets, as it's still the winter time here in Lebanon, and then also providing meals for people and just basic information, how to access any medication that they may need, where they can access some basic services.
What have we heard from the democratically elected leadership there and the extent to which they are inviting help, seeking help and a change of tactics from both sides?
So as humanitarian actors, we work very closely with the government of Lebanon. Even before this conflict, we have a response plan for the country that works carefully with the Ministry of Social Affairs and other government line ministries. So we continue to coordinate with them. They are really leading this response with the support of NGOs and UN agencies.
And just finally, Sabrina, in terms of the help that organisations like yours needs in the immediate term, are you getting it? What more do you need?
For sure, the current response has really been hindered by the changes in funding to humanitarian agencies that we've seen over the last year. We are really trying to deliver a response with far fewer resources than we would have seen in the past. So therefore, it's really important that organizations have the resources that they need to be able to help people with their most basic needs. It's food, it's water, it's shelter, and then later on to help them with rebuilding their lives after this conflict.
Sabrina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, whether you focus on, Lebanon, the UAE, this is a war on multiple fronts. But one place that we are focusing on an awful lot, of course, is the Strait of Hormuz. Again, it's been a flashpoint in the war. The US destroying 16 mine-laying boats there overnight.
Only a handful of vessels have travelled through the strait in recent days, many switching off their tracking systems or being linked to shadow fleets. Our data and forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire explains how some ships are beating the blockade.
A war that spread to multiple countries, thousands of targets hit, but now the focus is on one tiny 24-mile stretch of water, the Strait of Hormuz, and the giant implications it has for the global economy. Iran is saying, expel Israeli American ambassadors, you can use the straits. Donald Trump says that ships should just show a bit of guts and go through it. Well, we've been charting the ships that have been doing just that, the surprising tactics they're using and who Iran is letting through. Before the war, this was a super highway for cargo and oil tankers. When the shooting started, though, it came to a standstill. And that was before the Iranians even declared they had closed the straits. They stopped going there because of the danger, and this shows why. United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations has tracked direct strikes and attacks on ships in the Straits. At its smallest point, this is only just wider than the Strait of Dover, so there are not many places to hide. And this up here is the risk they run, a US crude oil tanker. It wasn't carrying any cargo, and according to the company, it had a contract with Iraq's state oil marketer. It was heading to an Iraqi terminal. An unmanned surface vessel, a USV, basically a drone ship, appears to strike it while it was moored in the North Persian Gulf, and this is the aftermath of that. Now, despite all of that, though, we've identified ships that have made the dangerous journey. It is not a lot, especially compared to what came before. You can see that over here. Ever since the war started, there have been just 13. And these are mainly Iranian and Chinese-owned ships, the countries most represented, and that is what you would expect. Iran isn't going to stop its own ships, and China has a close relationship. But this new data provided by Lloyd's List shows that most of the tankers being allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz since the war broke out, 8 out of 13, are from the so-called shadow fleet here in green. These are ships with opaque ownership, and they turn their identification off to avoid detection. And Lloyd's believe the number is likely to be even higher. We'll get into why that is in a moment. Because it isn't just banned shadow fleet ships that are getting through. We've also identified some from the UAE, from Germany, and from Greece. This is one, the Parallel, that threaded the needle, an oil and chemicals tanker that transited through the Strait of Hormuz on the 7th of March. It had its identification turned on throughout. It has links to India and the UAE as well. But others are using different tactics, turning their transponders off during the transit, making them more difficult to track. This shows one ship, the Rosanna here, not part of the shadow fleet. The dotted line is where it isn't broadcasting its identity, presumably to avoid being targeted. Now, it's gone dark between 1:02 p.m. on the 8th of March and just after 10 p.m. on the same day, while it was braving the strait. Some ships are using different tactics, though. Transponders can also declare a ship's destination. We found that several ships are changing their destination to say things like China, owner, and all crew over here. Effectively, this ship is saying as loudly as possible, this is a Chinese boat, let us through. We weren't able to independently verify the nationalities of crew members aboard these ships. But this is just a small group of thousands of ships that have been redirected from the Strait of Hormuz or are stuck waiting. Shipping giants like MSC and Maersk are being effective. Both have suspended routes through the Middle East. This shows tracking data from the 2nd of March showing Maersk Cincinnati, a container ship over here. And effectively, it's about to do a U-turn at the entrance to the Gulf of Oman, and it doesn't look back. It was still heading away from the area on the 4th of March. Sky News filmed footage from the UAE, a port there, on the same day, showing multiple tankers in the area. So ships are idling. Cargo is not arriving. Donald Trump might have said the war is very complete, pretty much, but until they get moving en masse again, the economic costs will continue to mount. Unless, of course, Iran thinks you're on its side, in which case it looks like it's prepared to help your cargo get through.
Tom Cheshire there. Now, a rabbi whose 3 children were killed in an Iranian attack in Israel has recalled the moment he learned the synagogue where they took shelter had been destroyed.
The attack on the second day of the war left 9 people dead. Our international correspondent Diana Magnay has this report.
This was the aftermath of a direct hit from an Iranian missile on the town of Beit Shemesh. 9 people were killed here, Israel's worst loss of life in the conflict so far. Yitzhak Beaton lost his 3 older children that day, Yaakov, Avigail and Sarah. They'd gone to the shelter beneath the synagogue, and that was where the missile hit.
The shelter itself, the shelter had collapsed, just collapsed, and everything was on fire. I saw that they were slowly bringing out bodies. After some time, we were asked to leave the area. They were in the middle of evacuation efforts. We waited for an answer until very late, until they came to take DNA sample. By that point, I already understood where this was going.
We met the family in a hotel in Jerusalem on their last day of Shiva, the 7-day mourning ritual to say goodbye to the dead. Beaton says his faith has helped him through this, that it is God's will.
I love everyone, I respect everyone, I appreciate everyone. I do not interfere in this matter. I understand that everything happens according to the will of the Creator.
And it was your little boy's 17th birthday that night. Tell me about your 3 children.
Yaakov was very special boy. He cared for all the children and youth throughout Beit Shemesh and other areas in the country. They were very special.
As a religious man, he won't be drawn on politics, but he did have a message about war.
It is well known that in war, in the end, everyone loses. There is no war in which anyone truly comes out a winner. Sometimes the victor is, in fact, the one who is defeated. We are in a very great danger. But of course, the aspiration of Judaism is to reach a reality of peace.
Diana Magnay with that piece. Now, 12 days on from the start of the US and Israeli strikes on Iran, the conflict has expanded, of course, across the rest of the Middle East, and a number of civilian deaths continues to rise.
Well, Sky's Cordelia Lynch spoke to some Israeli residents in Tel Aviv for their reactions to the war.
Even in wartime, Israelis are finding a way to party. They're used to conflict, now more than ever. But this time, it feels different. A necessary war, they say.
I think in this war something is really different because it's actually a just war. We're fighting for another people, for the Iranians. I'm half Persian. My grandparents are from Persia.
How long do you think that support will last?
I haven't seen any divided opinions. It's going all the way. It's funny, but it brings the country together. Wars bring the country together.
You don't get a sense of complacency or thoughtlessness here. Quite the opposite, actually. People are serious, they're reflective, but they're hopeful too. And that's the thing that struck me the most in the past week, is that this is a war most people support, and they're willing to get behind it for as long as it takes.
Cordelia Lynch there for us. Of course, much more to come on the situation in the Middle East in the next hour of the programme.
Yeah, we'll be updating you on all of that, plus the interviews to come as well. See you in a couple of moments' time.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning, it is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
US forces eliminate 16 Iranian ships laying mines near the Strait of Hormuz, while a container ship is hit by an unknown projectile.
A pro-Iranian march planned for London this weekend is banned, with concerns about violent clashes.
One of the Iranian footballers granted asylum in Australia changes her mind and will now go back to her country.
Also ahead, proposed reforms to the justice system by scrapping some jury trials have passed their first parliamentary hurdle.
And the first of the Mandelson files expected to be released today. It's all about his appointment as US ambassador.
Good morning. Let's start with Iran. And on a day America promised its most intense strikes, its forces have taken out 16 mine-laying boats near the Strait of Hormuz.
And look, it's been another fast-moving night, frankly, with Iran launching a new wave of strikes against Israel and US targets. Israel then launched their own attacks as well on Hezbollah targets in Beirut.
On top of that, a container ship has been hit by an unknown projectile off the coast of the UAE.
Well, here's our US correspondent David Blevins, who begins our coverage from Washington.
Eliminating the threat, the US boasting that it has completely destroyed multiple Iranian mine-laying vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, while the self-styled Secretary of War plays down fears of a long campaign.
This is not endless, it's not protracted, we're not allowing mission creep. The president has set a very specific mission to accomplish. And our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. He's the one deciding, he's the one elected on behalf of the American people when we're achieving those particular objectives.
Iran says it's fighting back. These pictures from state television. One official warned Donald Trump to be careful he wasn't eliminated himself. But US troops are taking out Iranian missiles and warning that the most intense strikes are being composed.
This beautiful symphony of American spirit is the definition of perfectly organized chaos.
But here on Capitol Hill, that beautiful symphony, well, it sounds a bit out of tune. Democratic members of Congress left the latest classified briefing telling us they had more questions than answers.
It is solely the responsibility of the United States Congress to declare war. Make no mistake, this is Trump's war. He says it every day. They can couch it however they want.
The Trump administration cannot explain the reasons that we entered this war, the goals we're trying to accomplish, and the methods for doing them.
So, in 6 weeks' time, as stated last week, or very soon, when does the White House expect this to end?
Ultimately, the operations will end when the commander-in-chief determines the military objectives have been met, fully realized, and that Iran is in a position of complete and unconditional surrender, whether they say it or not.
But it's images like these, the latest dignified transfer of one of America's fallen, that will add to the urgency for a government that's now ending war briefings with a plea for divine intervention.
May the Lord grant unyielding strength and refuge to our warriors, unbreakable protection to them and our homeland, and total victory over those who seek to harm them. And amen.
David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Bit of an update to bring you, because in the last hour, authorities in Dubai have said that 2 drones fell around Dubai International Airport and 4 people were injured in that strike. Sally Lockwood in Dubai for us. Sally, what can you tell us?
Morning to you, Sophie. Yes, in the last hour, 2 drones have fallen within the perimeter of Dubai International Airport, as we understand it, injuring 4 people. Dubai International Airport, as well as Abu Dhabi, have both been targeted a number of times in the last 12 days of this war. And Dubai is the busiest travel hub in the world. It's had enormous impact. That said, they are still managing to keep some flights going. They've reduced operations significantly, but flights are still going. But this latest incident at Dubai Airport, we understand, has caused injury to 4 individuals who were working there, according to officials here. And there was another incident in the early hours of this morning. Around 1 a.m. we received emergency alerts on our phone due to incoming missiles, and passengers in the terminal at the airport were ushered downstairs to shelters. So it remains an extremely volatile situation here every day, with these missile and drone attacks every day at the moment. But it's not just the busiest airport hub in the world that's being impacted. One of the busiest shipping routes in the world is also now a real flashpoint in this war. The Strait of Hormuz, which is just to the north of here, that very narrow waterway between the UAE and Oman to the south and Iran to the north, just 21 miles wide at its most narrow point. That is proving a real flashpoint, because it's been effectively closed now since this war began. And there was another vessel targeted overnight just off the northern emirate of Ras Al Khaimah. They sent out a distress call for help. The crew are all safe, but there was damage to the vessel. And there have been a number of cases like that with Iran targeting those vessels, as well as oil facilities within the area, because Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Around 20% of the world's energy flows through there from the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. And it's a very powerful weapon that they now have in this war, not just to hurt their enemies, but also to hurt the global economy.
So Sally, I mean, it's obviously ships, airports, but also oil fields being targeted again.
Yeah, that's right, Wilf. The Saudi Defense Ministry has reported that 5 drones were intercepted heading for one of their major oil fields in the southeast of the country, quite a remote area. The Sheba oil field produces around 1 million barrels of crude oil a day, and they intercepted drones heading for there. And you know, this is a different type of warfare. Iran knows that this is how they they really put pressure on America by targeting energy infrastructure that can cause so much damage and hurt to the global economy. And we saw the same happen in Qatar. There were drone attacks on their liquefied natural gas production there, and it's resulted in complete closure of LNG production at the moment in Qatar, something that would have been unthinkable 12 days ago. But Iran knows that this is how you put pressure, that how the international community will perhaps end up calling on America after so much disruption and instability now that we're seeing. That analysts say, you know, we can withstand this for a couple of weeks. It's going to be painful, but we can manage. But the Strait of Hormuz remaining closed for longer than that is a worst-case scenario for energy markets, and certainly disrupting the world energy supply and production like this will potentially put pressure on the international community for Donald Trump to find an off-ramp or to call a ceasefire. And we're already hearing that from Qatar's foreign minister, who's now calling for negotiations and for both parties to return to the negotiating table.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. Well, Sally, talking there about the energy crisis and all of that kind of thing. Wilf's been pouring over the markets, right? Yeah, let's have a look at what oil prices are doing. They have actually just picked up a couple of dollars per barrel since we looked at this an hour ago, showing, I guess, the ongoing tension that exists in oil markets as we speak. We're basically back up to just shy of $90 a barrel on Brent crude. It was 87 or so an hour ago. There's the chart for you. I mean, you can see we've pulled back massively from that $115 peak that was briefly held early on Monday morning. But I think the point to note is that we are still up significantly, both since the start of the war and since the start of the year. We started the year at about $60 a barrel for Brent, got up to about $72 per barrel before it broke out, and obviously have risen since then, despite that pullback of the last couple of weeks. So from the start of the year, we are still up about 50% or so, which is still an enormous amount for an economy to try and take into its stride if this sort of level persists. I think the question actually in markets today, in light of all of those ongoing tensions that Sally is talking about, most notably that the Strait of Hormuz is essentially still shut, is more that we're not
a little bit more back up to these levels as opposed to down. But there is ultimately calmness relative to where we started the week in oil prices. Let's just have a look at what this does for UK government borrowing costs, because the shape of the line there is fairly similar. We're down at 3.5% for two-year borrowing costs for the government earlier before the war started. We spiked up to 4.2%, an astonishing move. Again, only briefly held that level on Monday. We're around about 3.8, 3.9%. Now, the Bank of England base rate, remember, is 3.75%. As we started the month of March, it was expected to cut when they next gather on the 19th of March. Briefly, people wondered whether they'd have to hike. At the moment, it's really up in the air again. Probably not going to get any move from the current level of 3.75 when they meet in the next couple of days. But, Sophie, essentially, given the ongoing scale of military exchanges in the region, things are quite calm, certainly relative to where they were on Monday.
Yeah, just moves every day. It's like a different story every day.
That's the joy of markets.
Yeah.
Always breaking news.
Now, a request by police to ban a pro-Iranian march that was planned to be happening in London on Sunday has been approved.
The Home Secretary says banning the Al-Quds march will prevent the chance of serious public disorder. In a statement, Shabana Mahmood said, "I've approved the Metropolitan Police's request to ban the Al-Quds march. I'm satisfied doing so is necessary to prevent serious public disorder due to the scale of the protest and multiple counter-protests in the context of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East."
She goes on to say, should a stationary demonstration proceed, the police will be able to apply strict conditions. I expect to see the full force of the law applied to anyone spreading hatred and division instead of exercising their right to peaceful protest.
Graham Stoddard joins us now with all of the details behind this. Graham.
Yeah, this has come after quite a lot of pressure, actually, from politicians, specifically Labour MPs, Conservative MPs. This is an annual event. It takes place every year. It's widely seen as pro-Iranian, although the organisers maintain that actually it's mainly pro-Palestinian. But, of course, this year it drew more criticism than normal after its organisers expressed support for the Iranian regime, but also almost praised the late Iranian supreme leader, calling him a rare role model who chose to stand on the right side of history. Now, it was due to take place on Sunday, but the Islamic Human Rights Commission, the group which organises it, has said that the ban is actually politically charged. It's nothing to do with safety at all. And they've also accused the Met of abandoning their principle to police without fear or favour. But the Met says that the risk of unrest is just too great, something Shabana Mahmood obviously agrees with. They said that the context is so uniquely complex, the risks are so severe that placing conditions on the protest will not be sufficient to prevent it from resulting in serious public disorder, running the risk of injury to members of the public, protesters, police officers, and damage to property. Part of that, of course, is that actually a number of counter-protests had been planned. Interestingly enough, slightly different, but in their statement they also mentioned that they had prevented over 20 Iranian state-backed attacks on the UK in just the last 12 months, and that last week 4 people were arrested under the National Security Act after they allegedly spied on Jewish communities for the Iranian regime. This is the first time a protest march has been banned since 2012. A static protest is still planned. No doubt that will be heavily policed.
Yeah, because they can't. It's interesting. They don't ban static protests. It's the moving itself that the police and the Home Secretary have this power to intervene on.
Great, good stuff. Thank you. A member of Iran's women's football team has changed her mind after being granted asylum in Australia and deciding to return home.
Oh, we can speak now to our correspondent, Nicole Johnson, who has the latest from Sydney.
So it started earlier in the week with 5 of these Iranian female football players who'd been here for the Women's Asian Cup competition for about a month. At the last minute, 5 of them decided they wanted to stay in the country and they were granted asylum by the government. The big question, of course, was what would the rest of the team and the squad do? And it seemed that they were all going to head back. And we know that they're now in Malaysia waiting for another flight. But then this morning we found out that another 2 of them had decided to join the 5. And the government in Australia told us that they had managed to get some of the women, or all of the women, as it turns out, away from their minders at the very last minute, really as they were going through customs and immigration, leaving Australia, and offered them the chance to stay in Australia. So 2 decided to stay, but then only a few hours ago we found out that one of them had changed their mind. And really it goes to show what an incredibly difficult, complicated and fraught process this whole thing has been, and how hard the decision has been for them as well. But look, let's take a listen to what Australia's Immigration Minister had to say about it.
I think we need to remember this. When those players were silent at the start of their first match in Australia, that silence was heard as a roar all around the world. And the world wanted to know, and Australians wanted to know, how we would respond. We responded by saying the invitation is there. In Australia, you can be safe, you will be welcomed, you will be at home.
When that Iranian football player called the Iranian embassy to say that she changed her mind and she wanted to go home, that then let the embassy know where all of these other women were being kept, and they were being kept in a safe house somewhere in the country. So since then, the government has moved the other women. So it's really been a pretty problematic story, how this whole thing has played out. But the women have captured the hearts of Australians and people overseas, and people really sort of relate to, well, not relate, but empathise with this huge decision they're having to make, whether or not they'll stay in Australia or return to their country and their family, even while it's in the middle of a war.
Nicole Johnson reporting there. We can bring in Reform UK's Robert Jenrick, the party's Treasury spokesman, who is here now. Look, we're still, of course, reporting all day on Iran. So many consequences of this war. The US is now using UK bases for defensive strikes. Are you now comfortable with the level of UK involvement? Is that about right?
Yeah, look, I think the UK should have allowed its bases to be used by the United States from the outset. These are long-standing relationships. Some of these bases have been joint bases, like the one in Diego Garcia, going back to the 1970s. And it has harmed our relationship with the United States that the Prime Minister vacillated. But I don't see a reason for UK airmen and women to be doing offensive action against Iran. As far as I'm aware, no one's asked the UK to do that, and we shouldn't be endangering British servicemen and women unnecessarily. What really concerns me, actually, Sophie, about the situation now is what's happening here in the UK. I'm worried about the impact upon working people who are already suffering as a result of the cost of living and now seeing their bills rising every day, and that is what we should be taking action on now.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that as well. I'm a bit I'm slightly confused by Reform's position here. So you're saying that the UK wasn't right to block the US from using bases for offensive action, as in starting the war?
Well, we were never asked or given, we weren't asked to join this conflict, as far as I'm aware, and our allies, like the United States and Israel, haven't asked us to this day. So that there's never been a question of whether the UK itself should go and take part in offensive action against Iran. The question has been, should British bases be allowed to be used by the United States for the action that they've chosen to take? And yes, Nigel Farage and Reform have been very clear from the outset that we should have allowed those bases to be used because we want to be a reliable ally to the United States. They're our most important security partner, and the vacillation, indecision of the Prime Minister has weakened that relationship. We can all see that. And relations, frankly, with Cyprus, where our base is, and with those in the Gulf, where friends and allies there wanted to see the UK play some role and didn't. But that's a very different proposition, Sophie, to us going and joining the war and doing offensive action.
No one's talking about.
Well, actually, some people have.
Who's talking about that?
Well, the Conservative Party suggested that.
What did they say?
They said that we should be we should go and bomb missile launch sites in Iran. That's not the position of Reform. Reform is a party for working people. It's not a party for war. We want this war to come to an end as quickly as possible so that we can bring down people's bills, because people are struggling right now. I mean, I was at a petrol station in Derbyshire yesterday chatting to punters with Nigel Farage, and we met people, like parents in a rural area who are worried about the cost of driving to take their kids to school. We even heard on the radio that day somebody who was worried about going to hospital for their chemotherapy treatment, but because the distances were long, they weren't sure they could keep affording the cost of the fuel. That's why we're saying to Rachel Reeves, not just postpone, but cancel the increase in fuel duty, 5p a litre on your petrol, on your diesel, that she's looking to bring in later this year. Reform are trying to put as much pressure on her as possible. And we've said if she doesn't do it, then the first budget of a Reform government, we'll do it ourselves, and we'll bring that down and lighten the load just a little bit on people.
So you're crystal clear on the cost of living stuff. We know what you're saying there. What I'm still not clear on, I'm going to be honest, and I don't know if it's just me just being confused here, is what your position is on the war, right? So you're saying now that it's right for the US to have used bases, but we shouldn't get involved any further than that. And it does feel to me like that is a different tone from what people were saying at the beginning. So on 2nd of March, Nigel Farage saying we should do all we can to support the operation. We've also had Richard Tice saying a reform government would be helping the Americans and the Israelis in any way they saw appropriate. Nadeem Zahawi said the UK should join the bombing. So,
well, Nigel is the party leader, and I was at his side when he first spoke about this at a press conference, and he said 100% our bases should be made available to the United States to support their operations, because that is our long-standing obligation and we want to be a reliable ally. Second breath, he said absolutely no way should there be British troops, boots on the ground in Iran.
Just to stop, no one's talking about boots on the ground in Iran. Let's go back to what he did say. So you're talking about the press conference on 2nd of March when he said we should do all we can to support the operation. 2 days later, on the 4th of March, this is what Nigel Farage said.
To say he's no Churchill is quite an understatement, really, I would have thought. I mean, the man has dithered, he's all over the place, he's not a leader, he's a follower. His performance has been abject over the course of the last few days. I'm normally incredibly nervous about intervening in foreign wars. I believe this is the right one.
So you agree with what he says about Keir Starmer, no doubt, but then he goes on to say, I'm normally incredibly nervous about intervening in foreign wars, but I believe this is the right one.
Yeah, well, no one's mourning the death of the last Ayatollah, are they? I mean, this is a man who had attacked British servicemen who supplied the IEDs that killed British troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the point that Nigel was making, quite rightly, was that this is a wicked regime. If the United States and Israel, in their offensive action, can degrade that regime, prevent it from having nuclear weapons for the foreseeable future, then they are doing the world a service. That is a different situation to saying that we should put our own troops in danger doing offensive action over Iran. And Nigel has never said that.
Nigel,
so let's be clear on that.
I am being clear on what he said.
Boots on the ground. He's never suggested.
No one's suggesting boots on the ground. There's not even Americans
he's
boots on the ground.
never suggested that our airmen go and do offensive action over Iran. What he did say was two things. Number one, that we should have used our bases earlier and that failure to do so has damaged our relationship with our most important ally. Number two, that Starmer failed to defend our base in Cyprus and that put our servicemen and women in danger.
What Nigel Farage said, which I've just played you, is that he's normally incredibly nervous about intervening in foreign wars. I believe this is the right one and we should do all we can to support the operation. I feel like I'm in 1984 here when someone's saying, you know, black is white.
No, because...
He sounded very much like he was...
No, because this is... the context of that conversation was whether or not the bases should be made available for the United States. That was the debate at the time. And also, he was pointing out that the failure to protect our base in Cyprus was a massive dereliction of duty. You got servicemen and women in danger as drones and missiles were approaching, families on that site having to be taken out and put in hotels elsewhere in Cyprus, all the while Starmer hadn't moved a single ship into the region. The biggest armada of American naval assets brought to the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean in a generation, and not a single ship.
In fairness...
That's pathetic.
In fairness, you've been consistent throughout this, being, I think, reluctant to be too gung-ho about getting involved in this foreign intervention, right? But it feels to me that that is not the same of your Reform colleagues, despite the polling that shows people agree with the other view. Have you basically strong-armed them and kind of said...
No, not at all, not at all. We've all been on the same page. But you're right to say, from the outset, I've been very concerned about the impact of working people here, because people were suffering before the war, and they're going to be suffering even more as a result of it. So we've got to bring down people's bills. How could we do that? Get Rachel Reeves to cancel the increase in fuel duty.
OK, Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed.
Of course, the situation continues to be unstable in the Middle East. Let's get straight back out there, because our international correspondent, John Sparks, is in Beirut, and he's been moving around this morning as he joined us earlier, telling us that no one could have slept last night amongst the attacks. John, where are you now in Beirut?
Hi, Wilfred. Yeah, we are in the centre of the city in a district called Aisha Becker, which has been turned upside down, I think, to put it quite frankly. Ask my colleague just to follow me down the road here. You can see behind me all sorts of glass and rubble. There's a digger there trying to scoop some of it up, shards of metal that have been sprayed all over the place. And now let's show you the cause of that. We go up, you can see an apartment building with, what, 2, 3 floors essentially blown out. The windows have all gone, exposed concrete, reinforced bars. To the right, we can see a blanket, what looks like a child's pink jacket and some bedding, completely destroyed in some sort of Israeli precision strike. And that has sprayed all sorts of debris over the neighborhood. It's a middle-income neighborhood. It's mixed. It's densely populated. Shops, restaurants here as well, and obviously quite a crowd here that have come to check it out. I mean, what's going on? I mean, it's just one of a number of strikes that took place overnight. This one I think is particularly interesting because it bears the hallmarks of a targeted attack, an assassination attempt by the Israelis. We know that because no evacuation warning, no evacuation order was given. And the problem with that, of course, the people who live in the local neighborhood, they're not alerted either. We've got some data from the local civil defense bureau. Like the emergency services, they say 3 people killed, 6 injured so far. And we know from a previous attack on Sunday morning at a hotel, the Ramada Plaza Hotel, that's not too far from here, the Israelis claim to have killed senior commanders, 4 senior commanders from Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They say their personnel are here working as military advisors to Hezbollah. But I think it goes to show, I can see all the chaos over here, it goes to show that there is no front line in Beirut. There is no front line. The Israelis are able to target when and where they want. And here we are, we're looking at the aftermath. You can see the cars here have been trashed. Huge disturbance, the traffic's been stopped. There's a local politician giving an interview. Really, the government here in Lebanon, they are not in control of this. They are not able to manage this situation. They've told Hezbollah to desist its attacks. Hezbollah is not listening. The president of this country has asked for direct negotiations with the Israelis. The Israelis have said, no, we won't do that until you are able to rein in Hezbollah. A very difficult thing for the government to do here. It could, possibly it would, well, it would certainly create great tensions. I think the fear is that that would turn into some sort of civil conflict or civil war. So this conflict is complicated. It exists on many layers, and perhaps this the most evident at the moment. Anywhere in this country subject to strikes, and it's really thrown this part of the city, well, upside down, I think.
On that note, John, I mean, maybe this is a sort of slightly silly question, but what do the residents around there think of these attacks? I guess I'm getting to the point of the changing view, maybe not, because of the way Iran has retaliated across the region. Has it changed the perspective of residents there about which side they take on this, or not?
Yeah, Wilfred, it's a good question. I mean, just in terms of this attack, we've been speaking to local residents, and they said, we thought the entire neighborhood was under attack. It was so loud, the blast was so big, and it sent up a big fireball over this part of the city just before dawn. I mean, the entire area thought that they were under attack. It was like that. I think in terms of the more general attitude towards this, I think it's fair to say that nobody in this country, or very few people, want this war. They've just been through a 13-month conflict that ended at the end of 2024. You know, people had their homes destroyed, their livelihoods ruined. People don't want to go through this again. And that includes members of the Shia Muslim community that Hezbollah draws its support from. But it's another thing entirely to expect members of that community to challenge Hezbollah directly. That's a very difficult thing to do. Start with the fact that Hezbollah, it's not just a military organization, it's a political and it's a social organization. They employ a lot of people in this country. Say one out of 5 members of every Shia Muslim family owe their livelihoods to Hezbollah. So that's a very difficult thing to do. So, and that makes it very difficult for the government as well to challenge Hezbollah. They are an immovable force in this country. A government, they're often described as a government within a government. I think there is disquiet. I think there is real frustration. I really don't think very many people in this country want this. They certainly don't want scenes like this, in their cities, their towns. You're seeing entire communities in South Lebanon being razed. It's not unlike what we have seen in Gaza. It really is that bad. It's that serious. But it's another thing entirely to expect members of the Shia Muslim community and the government of Lebanon to directly challenge Hezbollah. But that's how I see it.
John, great stuff. Thanks so much. We really appreciate it. And as ever, stay safe out there.
Now, so many questions, and our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, is with us again this morning. We're very lucky, and he's ready to answer your questions as well. Scan the QR code on screen to contact us on WhatsApp. If there's something you want to know about what's going on in Iran or the Middle East, you can also send an email to mornings@sky.uk. I have noticed one person who emailed into the inbox.
Yeah. I did. I love speaking to Michael so much. I'm really glad we're giving the viewers a chance to ask questions, but I don't want to be cut out of the process entirely.
Wilf, yeah.
Well, don't tell him what the questions
are. I'm not going to reveal it. Just about half an hour before coming on air.
I don't know actually how we're deciding how they get selected, but to the production team out there...
If you've got a question, mornings@sky.uk, like Wilf did, or you can scan the QR code to WhatsApp us as well. I might do that. I might have to do a little WhatsApp question now.
Yeah, there we
See
go.
which one gets picked.
Oh, if they only pick one, there'll be a hell tonight.
Brutal.
Right, we'll be right back.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Rich and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Welcome back. We've talked a lot in recent days about the extent to which the situation in the Middle East is influencing things back here in the markets and also in the economy as a whole. The OBR has warned the UK inflation rate could rise to about 3% by the end of the year. Mohammed El-Erian, Chief Economic Advisor at Allianz, joins us. Mohammed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
An interesting point just to start off before we get to the impact on the UK economy is the market reaction. We were showing the charts earlier. Obviously, oil prices up 45% so far this year, but down quite a lot from the peak on Monday. And yet, since the more positive rhetoric has emerged on Monday, we haven't really seen any further access through the Strait of Hormuz and related factors. Do you feel the market is overreacting, underreacting as we sit here now?
So it's been wild to see these moves. We went from under 70 to almost 120, all the way back again, as you showed on the chart. I think right now the market is too optimistic. The market has an 80% probability that this will be a short war, that the disruptions will be quickly reversed, and that will go on as we were before. I think it's that probability, instead of being 80%, is about 50%. So I would expect oil to remain volatile, and I would expect oil to go higher from here.
And what are the key factors you look out for? Is it as simple as, is the Strait of Hormuz open again?
Yes, but also it's not enough for the US to declare victory. The US can declare victory today. However, they have to convince Iran and Israel to stop as well. That's hard. Second, this is an asymmetrical war, and it's very hard to stop asymmetrical wars. It's very hard to stop the drones coming from different directions when the authority has been delegated down to unit commanders. So the one thing you've got to be careful is that it's not easy to turn it off. And then the third thing is, once you disrupt oil production, once you disrupt shipping lanes, it takes time to go back to normal. So this notion that it will end quickly and it will be fine, I think is over-optimistic.
And how many more days of the current level of tensions need to persist before we see another spike in the oil price?
So today we've seen a reaction already to a tanker being attacked and the crew having to be evacuated. And you're going to see that. It's going to be incredibly volatile. We are going to feel it three ways, and I don't think we're going to be able to avoid it, unfortunately. And it pains me to say this, Wilfred. One is higher prices, and the OBR is right. Inflation is more likely to end at 3% than 2%. Second, lower growth. We may well look at a growth rate below 1%. That's not enough. And third, greater inequality.
And talk me through, I want to come to the inequality point, but talk me through what the government should do in the face of that sort of pressure on people at home, because there's already talk and calls for help with people's energy bills. Can we afford that right now?
We could, but the room for maneuver is very limited. The so-called headroom, how much the government can do within its own rules, is limited. And already we've seen the bond market much more nervous here than in Europe or in the US. As an example, in the first few days, the increase in borrowing costs in the UK were 50% more than what the US experienced. So the government's got to be really careful, because it's got the market looking at its fiscal situation with some concern.
How much of that is not just what will be the absolute cost of a particular package, but kind of reminding people or worrying people that this is a precedent that is now the norm in the UK? Any sign of trouble, we'll just spend more money.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the major worry is what you call the high beta, that whatever happens in the world, the UK gets hit more than other countries. And that's because of structural weaknesses. We haven't grown enough. Our productivity growth is slow. And also because we have very limited policy space. There isn't much space to respond, either on the monetary side or on the fiscal side.
On the flip side, as I guess you've already alluded to, energy price increases are unequal in the way that they affect people. So there is certainly a case to help people.
Oh, there's certainly a case to help the most vulnerable segments of the population, but you have to pay for it. And that's what gets difficult. You don't want to pay for it by cutting other services. Already public services are stretched. And taxation becomes, there's certain things that are going to kick in. The windfall gains on oil companies, that's going to kick in. And I suspect the government will look at other sources of windfall gains.
In terms of the kind of overall outlook for the economy, you obviously alluded there to GDP growth falling to about 1% or so. You wrote an op-ed in the FT a couple of days ago using the word stagflation, which is a sort of much more terrifying term to be throwing around now. What are the risks of a really major economic fallout for the UK, but also for the G7, where we're suddenly staring at stagflation?
So stagflation, the stag side is lower growth, the inflation side is high inflation. We will get some of that. I call it a stagflationary wind. But to get major stagflation, you've got to expose existing weaknesses. And there's 3 in the UK. Low productivity, so there's no dynamism that offsets the negative shock. Second, the bond vigilantes. Let's not forget what happened in 2022 in response to the Liz Truss moment, when we suddenly exposed the fragility of the pension system. And then the third weakness is the ability of people to invest in the UK. So my concern is the longer this war continues, the more you're going to expose underlying fragilities that then make the consequences worse than they would have been otherwise.
Inflationary pressures clearly are something that will be a limiting factor for the Bank of England. Do you now think rate cuts are off the table for the foreseeable future?
So that's what the market thinks. The market thinks that if we get a rate action, it's going to be a hike, not a cut. 2 weeks ago, the market expected a cut. Now the market says if the Bank of England moves, it will be a hike.
Final quick question, Mohammed. You talked about complacency, I think, in the oil markets at the moment. What about people's stocks and shares and equity markets?
I think it depends where you are, Wilfred. It's very hard to make a general comment. I think the 3 themes, whether you're a policymaker or you're an investor, that you have to embrace this year is volatility. We're going to be subject to more shocks. Second, dispersion. You're going to see different outcomes within countries and across countries. And the third is fragmentation. We're fragmenting the global economy, and that will have longer-term consequences.
Mohammed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Mohammed Al-Larian with us there.
Just want to bring you the latest pictures of Peter Mandelson. This is him leaving his home this morning. Of course, we are awaiting the release, the first tranche of files relating to his appointment as US ambassador. That should be shortly after Prime Minister's questions, the government releasing the first lot of files, emails, WhatsApp messages relating to his appointment there.
Will all unfold, as Sophie said, shortly after PMQs, and it will be live here on Sky News, as will PMQs. Let's have a quick look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
So the rain's back, unfortunately, over the next few days. Strong winds, showers, and also some longer spells of rain as well, with some colder air moving in by Friday. It's pretty windy out there now, some coastal gales, locally severe in the far northwest. England and Wales should expect a largely dry morning, though, with some sunny spells. A few showers are likely, though, in the south mainly. And elsewhere, blustery showers will be more widespread, prolonged across Scotland for a time in particular, with the risk of hail and thunder.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
When we come back, we'll be talking more about the reforms that the government's trying to push through in terms of the justice system. We'll be right back.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS.
The next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away. Okay, but listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Welcome to the world.
Come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? This is the war game.
There were a number of armed security.
We want to discover, to find out what's really going on.
Everything you need to know about British politics in about 20 minutes. I actually don't like political drama.
So, where next?
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Welcome back. As we were discussing earlier, Number 10 will release the first batch of documents about Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador today. As we know, he's facing allegations of misconduct in public office.
So it's a moment of jeopardy for Keir Starmer, but for today at least, he won't face questions about what he did or didn't know because the files are being released just after Prime Minister's questions.
On this issue of Peter Mandelson and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, we all have a shared interest in bringing some accountability and transparency to these issues. So the first tranche will be published this afternoon. A second tranche, though, will come later because there's been further work that we've had to do across government in response to the humble address, which is not quite ready. And we have 2 other processes that take a bit of time, given the live criminal investigation with the Metropolitan Police and the role of the Intelligence and Security Committee in Parliament that has some oversight of it.
When you say later, is this like a few days later, a few months later, or you have no idea?
The second tranche, I mean, it's probably in the weeks, but we're trying to get through it as quickly as possible. It just needs those approvals from the committee and from the Met Police before we can then come back to Parliament with them.
Makes sense. Helpful that it's been released just after Prime Minister's questions, so the Prime Minister doesn't have to face questions on it?
Well, I mean, Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons every Wednesday. I mean, it's just normal scheduling in the House of Commons that statements come after PMQs on a Wednesday. But we have committed to Mr. Speaker that they will be published very promptly so that members get the chance to read them before I stand up so that they can ask me any questions about them.
So you've got the tough job then, not the Prime Minister, basically.
Always happy to do my job.
Well, Alex joined us now. He took it with good grace, didn't he? The fact that he's really the one answering all the questions from MPs, right?
He did, yeah, and he was at sort of pains to stress that the government's taking this seriously, wants to be as transparent about it as possible. We said a big number of documents, but I think it's still a little bit unclear, what's going to be in these files, how extensive they are going to be, considering there is this police investigation into Peter Mandelson. But clearly, Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to Keir Starmer, clear that they're taking this seriously.
It's interesting. I wonder whether it's also convenient, just thinking it through, that it's him doing it because he was Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the time. So he's probably not involved in the decision-making in the first place. So he might be clear and able to deflect the questions a bit better.
Quite possibly, but I mean, the government is still... This was a really damaging episode for the entire government, really, and it even nearly cost Keir Starmer his job about a month ago when Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, called for him to go. So I think the real significance of today is just bringing up that row again, reminding voters and the public that this happened and that this did not reflect well on Keir Starmer or any of the government, really.
There's going to be loads of documents as well, right? This is the other thing, right? You know, emails, WhatsApp messages, and I know some of it will be redacted, some of it probably very legitimately for security reasons and all that kind of thing. But there's going to be a lot for journalists to go through.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I wonder whether the absence of things as well could prompt a backlash as well, that the MPs aren't satisfied by what they get. So, again, just bringing up this sorry saga that the government wants to put to bed, but it's going to drag on, I think, for sure.
Alex Christoph, thank you. Now, plans to reduce jury trials have successfully passed through the Commons, although 90 MPs unhappy with the move didn't vote. It is also just the second reading stage thus far.
The Victims Commissioner, Claire Waxman, is urging members to focus on the negative impacts of lengthy court delays and the risk to public safety. So she's somebody who is in favour, on balance, with the reforms. We can talk to someone who has concerns, though, the former Director of Public Prosecution, Sir David Calvert-Smith. Thank you very much for being with us. So, first of all, what is your take on what the government is trying to do when it comes to jury trials?
Well, I'm opposed on principle to serious reduction in the right to jury trial. Following up on your introduction, the delays, of course, affect victims, but they also affect innocent defendants. And people can be on bail or in custody awaiting trial for far too long before their trials get reached. So the system clearly needs reform. My concern is that abolishing one of the cornerstones of the unwritten British Constitution for a huge number of cases to substitute for having failed over the last decades to fund the system properly so that there are enough courtrooms available and enough judges and so on to try them is a big mistake. We've been through this before. In the 80s, I'm old enough to remember, we had an identical situation. And the solution was not to remove the right to jury trial and the whole cut the system in half, but to find buildings in which to sit extra courts, to create youngsters like me, as I then was, as assistant recorders, i.e. very junior circuit judges, and so on and so forth, in order to increase the capacity of the system to deal, which was then a crisis, just as it is now, of people waiting 2 to 3 years for their trials to be reached, whether as victim or as defendant. So simply to take a knife to jury trial, and when these things are done, they're very rarely ever reversed when things get better, seems to me a very damaging and worrying move. I also just say this. One other, sorry to go on so long, but obviously when people meet me, knowing what I used to do for a living, they often say, oh, I was on a jury once. And I have not met a single person who has not said to me that their experience of jury service was not rewarding, in the sense that they got to know how the system worked, got to know people they would never have met before, had to take really important decisions affecting other people's lives, and so on and so forth. And very few of them have ever said to me that it was a waste of time and it shouldn't exist. Jury service is a positive, not just for the system, but for all of us citizens who have to do it.
Do you think this would work to cut backlog, even if it's a price too high to pay in your mind?
Well, I'm not really qualified to judge. I mean, on the face of it, it looks as though it would. Yes. Of course, the magistrates' courts will come under huge pressure if more and more cases are in front of them. And they have to deal with them, and the stock of magistrates ready to do the work is probably limited.
We're going to have to jump in, but it's been so interesting to get your perspective, and also in particular, actually, your emphasis that victims, but also people who are on bail or on trial or on charge innocently, also having this, you know, put on hold for years and years because of the delays. A really important point. Thank you for being on the programme.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Now we're joined by our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, because, Michael, you are coming back at 9:30 for an extended Q&A, and please do scan the QR code that we're about to put up on the screen. Please do email us mornings @sky.uk to get your questions in for our extended Q&A. A quick question for now, Michael, which is, I guess, a couple of days on from the rhetoric from Donald Trump that this could be over soon. It's clear that that's not the case. The Strait of Hormuz essentially remains closed.
Yeah, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, as we said, I think, last week, that is in every respect the trump card that the Iranians can play, because they can keep the straits effectively closed just by making it dangerous. And the United States has got onto that now. And the Pentagon is saying that saying that they're hitting mine-laying ships. They're going after mines.
Michael, I think your mic's not working for some reason. It is on.
Yeah, we're not sure. We're not sure when on. It hasn't. We've been told it's fallen off. It hasn't fallen off. We can see it on his lapel, but we're not totally sure what's going on. Anyway, we've got some time to sort it out. It's a good news.
Build some extra time for 9:30. As we said, do get your questions in. You can ask. I think it's run out of batteries. No, it's still on. Anyway, we'll have it fixed for 9:30. Get your questions in, please, for Michael. We'll have an extended 15-20-minute chat with Michael at 9:30. Any question at all?
Whatever.
There we go.
He's a Villa fan, if you want a football question, but there you go. Yeah. We'll have lots coming up, of course, on the latest of the run. We'll be talking to Michael Clark with those questions in just a few moments' time.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report. And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from me as well. Some more develops to bring you this hour.
Reports that another cargo vessel has been struck in the Strait of Hormuz as US forces eliminate 16 Iranian ships laying mines in the vital sea passage.
A pro-Iranian march planned for London this weekend is banned with concerns about violent clashes.
One of the Iranian footballers granted asylum in Australia changes her mind and will now return to the country.
We'll also be talking to our defence and security analyst, Professor Michael Clark, again this morning. He's ready to answer your questions on the conflict.
And the first of the Mandelson files expected to be released today over Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador.
It's another fast-moving day. A key shipping route for the world's oil supply has become a battleground. As we know, in the war in the Middle East, 3 cargo ships have now been hit in the Strait of Hormuz just today. Last night, US forces said they took out 16 mine-laying boats there as well. And Iran, in recent days, has threatened to fire on any vessel who goes there. That would effectively close it. But it hasn't claimed these particular attacks.
It's meant that Iran has launched this new wave. Israel, meanwhile, has been launching their own attacks on Hezbollah targets in Beirut. Let's have a look at the key developments.
So, another cargo vessel seems to have been struck in the Strait of Hormuz. That's according to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Centre. They received this report of a vessel being hit by an unknown projectile in the shipping lane. It's just off the coast of Dubai. The crew are safe and well, but look, it's the second report of such an incident in just 2 hours. Earlier today, another cargo ship was hit by another unknown projectile.
Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz is all but stopped after Iran threatened to attack any vessel attempting to pass through. Of course, it's hugely important for the transport of oil.
So meanwhile, US forces have struck 16 mine-laying boats near the Strait of Hormuz. The US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says that yesterday was the most intense day of strikes on Iran so far.
This is not endless. It's not protracted. We're not allowing mission creep. The president has set a very specific mission to accomplish, and our job is to unrelentingly deliver that. Now, he gets to control the throttle. He's the one deciding, he's the one elected on behalf of the American people when we're achieving those particular objectives.
Well, Israel and Iran continue to exchange fire across the Middle East, with Israel striking Tehran and Iran-backed Hezbollah militants in Lebanon. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE and Bahrain have reported Iranian attacks today. Here are some pictures that we just had in from Beirut.
Well, you can see there a site that has become very familiar to us, and a noise that's become familiar as well. Blasts in Beirut, the capital city of Lebanon, as those Israeli strikes continue.
Well, in a moment, we'll be speaking to Sally in Dubai. But first, let's go to Beirut. John is there once again for us. John, I hope you're a long way away from that explosion, which I guess you must have heard. I mean, I think I'm right in saying what we played out there would have taken place in your rough vicinity in the course of the last hour, not just overnight.
Yeah, the southern suburbs of Beirut, they've been pounded through the night. I mean, you need to be a very sound sleeper to get through that. I think just about everybody in the city has been kept awake tonight, particularly where I am in a district very close to the center. It's a middle-income district. It's densely populated. It's mixed. Shia, Sunni, Christian. They live here, and one of the apartment buildings has been subjected to pretty major attack. Just going to move my colleague back a little bit. It's pretty frenetic here. People cleaning up the streets. You can see that blast. It has sprayed glass, rubble, shards of metal all over the place. I wouldn't call it a precision strike, more like a targeted strike. It's taken out parts of four floors in this building. You can see they're trying to sort things out here. It's a bit of a metaphor for Beirut. You know, you've had a missile strike on an apartment building, and somehow life continues. I don't want to make sure we don't get our feet run over. Okay. Right, here we're going to move back a bit, so we're in the way. But it's a targeted strike by the Israelis. There was no evacuation order here. There was no warning to local residents. We assume they were after specific individuals, and they've done this before, just behind you there, yeah. They've done this before on Sunday morning, a hotel near to here called the Ramada Plaza. The Israelis took out a corner flat, a corner room there. They said they killed 4 senior commanders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, who the Israelis say they have personnel here. They're working as military advisors to Hezbollah. And I think it goes to show there is no front line in Lebanon. The Israelis can attack the location of their choosing at the time of their choosing. And you can see the aftermath of that here. Yeah, here, we're just going to move back. It's pretty frenetic here. There's a lot of cleaning up and stuff going on. They've reattached the electricity. They're trying to get the road functioning again. And I suppose that's an example of the government of this country functioning to a certain extent, but they're certainly not able to maintain the situation. They're certainly not able to rein Hezbollah in, and the government here certainly not able to do anything about the Israeli strikes either. I mean, it has turned into a real humanitarian disaster in this country. You're looking at almost 600 people have been killed, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, and you'll have people from here looking for somewhere else to stay as well. So I mean, it's really, nobody's been untouched by this in Lebanon.
John, it's so powerful to hear and to witness the impact of what is happening in Beirut. As you say, no front line, 600 people killed. Stay safe, and thank you for your reporting. We can talk now to Sally Lockwood, who's in Dubai for us. Sally, can you just bring us the latest on these ships in the Strait of Hormuz? What do we know?
Yes, Sophie, we've had another update in the last hour, and it seems that 3 vessels have now been hit in the last 12 hours in and around the Strait of Hormuz. 1 off the coast of Dubai, where we are, and 2 off the coast of Ras Al Khaimah, which is a northern emirate to the north of here, which is usually very popular with tourists and weekenders because it's a quieter coastline, but not at the moment, because there's a huge build-up of vessels off the coast of Ras Al Khaimah, which is the entry point to the Strait of Hormuz, and many are just stuck there because they're unable to cross because it's been effectively closed for the last 12 days in this war, and it's become extremely dangerous. Even here, just off the coast, it's quite hazy at the moment, but we've been able to make out dozens of vessels just at standstill. And it's causing huge problems, not just for security here in this very narrow waterway between Oman and the UAE to the south and Iran to the north, but it's being felt through the global economy already. And I've actually had more detail from a shipping contact who I spoke to half an hour ago, who said to me that one of the incidents that occurred around 4:30 this morning was a Thai-flagged ship that was heading east, trying to escape the Strait of Hormuz, and it was hit by an unknown projectile, which we think was probably a drone. The ship caught fire, and all the crew abandoned ship after making a distress call, and there have been a number of incidents like that. The Strait of Hormuz is becoming a flashpoint in this war because it is controlled by Iran. It's a very powerful weapon, not just for hurting their enemies, but for hurting the global economy. And I've been speaking to analysts who've said to me, you know, we can probably cope with a couple of weeks of this. It's going to be painful, but it's manageable. Anything beyond this is worst case scenario for energy markets.
Sally, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. Let's have a look at what this all means for markets. And much calmer than Monday, but actually in just the last couple of hours, Sophie, we've seen a little bit of a pickup again in volatility and oil prices. So when we did this 2 hours ago, the oil price on Brent was at 87. We're now basically back up to 90 again, so this needs to tick up a fraction. Either way, the general theme is clear. Oil prices up significantly on the year and up significantly since the start of the war, but off their peak from Monday early morning. But still, with that risk, that volatility priced in, oil prices were flat at 87 2 hours ago on the day. They're now up 2 or 3% at about 90 at this trading hour at this moment. And either way, in terms of impacting the economy going forward, even if we stayed at this level without further volatilities from the start of the year to now, we're up about 40, 45% for oil prices. So still a significant increase from where we started the year. What does this mean for borrowing costs? Well, it's kind of similar shaped charts to this, and similar moves in just the last hour since bond markets opened. You can see we've ticked back up again. So yes, we're well up on where we started the war. We're well down on that momentarily spike and peak of the fears on Monday. Down from there, but just ticking up again, something to keep an eye on. And as we've been discussing over the course of this conflict, Sophie, it's all about how long things persist. At the moment, oil is not able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, even if we're getting that more encouraging rhetoric from President Trump. If things persist as they are, we'll start to see those spikes up again, the volatility pick up again going forward.
I mean, it's not just what they say, is it? Like you say, look at what's happened this morning with these 3 vessels, you know, in the Strait of Hormuz. Also, the other thing that we are looking at in the UK is this demonstration that was planned in central London on Sunday. It's a request by police to ban what was seen as a pro-Iranian march. That's been approved.
The Home Secretary says banning the Al-Quds march will prevent the chance of serious public disorder.
Well, in a statement, Shabana Mahmood said, "I've approved the Metropolitan Police's request to ban the Al-Quds march. I'm satisfied doing so is necessary to prevent serious public disorder due to the scale of the protest and multiple counter-protests in the context of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East."
Should a stationary demonstration proceed, she went on to say, the police will be able to apply strict conditions. I expect to see the full force of the law applied to anyone spreading hatred and division instead of exercising their right to peaceful protest. Graham's with us now to tell us a bit more about this. Graham, quite a high-profile decision to ban the march.
Yeah, absolutely. This is quite a high-profile march. It happens every year, and it's widely seen as pro-Iranian, although the organisers say actually it's mainly pro-Palestinian. But this year, obviously, it's drawn particular criticism, mainly because its organisers express support for the Iranian regime and admiration almost for the late leader as well, calling him a role model who chose to stand on the right side of history. It was due to take place this Sunday, but the Met Police consider the risk of unrest too high, something Shabana Mahmood obviously agrees with. In a statement, the police said the context is so uniquely complex and the risks are so severe that placing conditions on the protest will not be sufficient to prevent it from resulting in serious public disorder, running the risk of injury to members of the public, protesters, police officers and damage to property.
And I guess the thing is, this is rare, right? Marches don't get banned very often.
Absolutely. It's been over a decade. The last protest march that was banned was back in 2012. It's really not a common thing. And actually, the organisers, they're called the Islamic Human Rights Commission. They've said that the decision is politically motivated, that the police have abandoned any pretense of their principle of policing without fear or favour. And they say that it's got nothing to do with public safety. But the police, they say, well, actually, they've pointed to past Al-Quds marches where people have been arrested on suspicion of anti-Semitic hate crimes, support for proscribed terrorist organisations as well. So the protest march has been banned. A static protest is still due to go ahead. Counter-protests are still due to go ahead. So it's going to be, I suspect, a very heavy police presence, maybe quite a febrile atmosphere in London this Sunday.
Graham, great stuff as always. Thank you. Now, 12 days on from the start of the US-Israeli strikes on Iran, the conflict's expanded across the Middle East, as we've been, of course, discussing, and the number of civilian deaths continues to rise.
Well, Sky's Cordelia Lynch spoke to Israeli residents in Tel Aviv for some of their reactions to the war.
Even in wartime, Israelis are finding a way to party. They're used to conflict, now more than ever. But this time, it feels different. A necessary war, they say.
I think in this war something is really different because it's actually a just war. We're fighting for another people, for the Iranians. I'm half Persian. My grandparents are from Persia.
How long do you think that support will last?
I haven't seen any divided opinions. It's going all the way. It's funny, but it brings the country together. Wars bring the country together.
You don't get a sense of complacency or thoughtlessness here. Quite the opposite, actually. People are serious, they're reflective, but they're hopeful too. And that's the thing that struck me the most in the past week, is that this is a war most people support, and they're willing to get behind it for as long as it takes.
Well, the last time the United States entered into war in the Middle East was, as many people remember, all of us, I'm sure, was Iraq in 2003. So what, if any, lessons can be taken?
We're joined now by Hamid Al-Kifayeh, the former Iraqi government spokesperson and advisor and writer on Middle Eastern affairs. Hamid, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Have you been experiencing déjà vu in the last couple of weeks in terms of how this conflict started?
Well, this conflict didn't really have any defined aims to start with. You know, the Israelis have different aims to the Americans. I don't think the Americans will last long because, you know, this war has caused a lot of damage and also caused energy prices to go up. So I don't think the Americans want the war to continue. The Israelis perhaps want a regime change, but that doesn't happen. It wouldn't happen during a war. The Iranian people will not rise and bring down the regime as long as the bombs are falling. So this war, has really no aims, have different aims. Obviously, the original aim was to degrade the Iranian ability to produce a nuclear bomb or ballistic missiles, but that hasn't happened because the Iranian missiles are still falling in Israel and other neighboring countries and so on. So it's very muddled and very confused situation.
In the UK, we're very scarred by Iraq and the consequences of intervention there, right? And I just wonder, do you think there are similarities and parallels between what's happening in Iran as to the intervention in Iraq or not?
Well, really, it's very few, because in Iraq, Iraq was a weaker country at that time, and the regime was hated by most people, and all Iraqis were expecting a change. And the Americans were ready and prepared to go on the ground, and they sent 150,000 soldiers to Iraq. In Iran, it's different. Iran is a huge country. The regime is entrenched and also has got military arms, loyal military arms. And obviously there are people who are in opposition. Opposition is very strong in Iran, popular opposition. But the Iranians are different to Iraqis. Iraq was and still is a divided society, a divided country. The Iranians, although there are many groups like the Kurds, the Baluch, the Arabs, who have different aims, they want federal governments or whatever, but the main country is coherent. It's a coherent country. I think this war could have been avoided had the Americans continued dialogue with the Iranians. And to be honest, the West in general have tolerated this Iranian regime, which has been interfering in countries of the region, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in the Yemen, in Syria, and so on. This tolerance has gone for too long. Now it's really difficult to handle this regime. There has got to be a long-term solution. And it doesn't seem to be any plan for a long-term solution.
How significant do you think has been the shift in perspectives across neighbouring countries because of the broad nature of Iran's retaliation?
Well, neighbouring countries have always suspected that Iran is a hostile country.
now they know for sure Iran is a hostile country. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, and these countries have not attacked Iran. They have no, in fact, they opposed the American assault on Iran. Yet these countries, even Oman, which was mediating between the Americans and the Iranians, was attacked. So Iran has actually proved itself to be a hostile country, a country that cannot live within the region. It cannot really reconcile itself with other countries. It doesn't understand international, international policies. It doesn't respect international law. So the Iranian regime has actually proven, has given proof to the world that it is really, it cannot live within its borders, and it cannot understand the world. And perhaps the only way for the world to deal with Iran is to aim at a regime change. How this happens, this has got to be thought out.
Yeah, it's difficult, easier said than done, right? I mean, is there a way where you can see it happening?
There is a way, of course there is a way, because the Iranian regime has its arms outside Iran. For example, it used Hezbollah in Lebanon, it used militias in Iraq, it used militias in Yemen, and these have got to be dealt with. And it's easy to deal with, easier to deal with these proxies than with the main regime in Iran. When these proxies are weaker or weak or eliminated completely, and they can be eliminated if, for example, the Americans strengthen the Iraqi government, strengthen, for example, the Lebanese government, then Iran cannot intervene in other countries. And the problem of nuclear weapons remains a problem, but this can be dealt with by the international energy, nuclear, atomic energy.
Yeah.
This can be done, and there was an agreement, but the Americans withdrew from it in 2018. So there has got to be a sort of a plan, well thought out plan to deal with Iran, but it seems that no plan has been really put up for now.
Hamid, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our defence and security analyst, we should say, Professor Michael Clark, is going to be with us again in 10 minutes' time to answer your questions about the war. We've had loads coming in already. If you want your question to be answered by Michael, you can scan the QR code on screen right now. Contact us on WhatsApp if there's something you want to know about what is going on in Iran. You can also email us mornings@sky.uk, mornings@sky.uk. That's 9:30.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, before we get into that Q&A with Michael, we'll give you the very latest on the Mandelson documents that are due to be released this lunchtime.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started. Let's bring you up to speed on the long-awaited Mandelson documents, because Number 10 are going to be releasing the first batch of information about his appointment as US ambassador today. He, of course, facing allegations of misconduct in public office. It's a moment of real jeopardy for Sir Keir Starmer, but for today, at least, he won't face immediate questions on it because they're going to be dropped after PMQs. Here is Darren Jones speaking about it on the programme earlier.
On this issue of Peter Mandelson and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, we all have a shared interest in bringing some accountability and transparency to these issues. So the first tranche will be published this afternoon. A second tranche, though, will come later because there's been further work that we've had to do across government in response to the humble address, which is not quite ready. And we have two other processes that take a bit of time, given the live criminal investigation with the Metropolitan Police and the role of the Intelligence and Security Committee in Parliament that has some oversight of it.
Let's talk to Alex, shall we? What are we expecting today?
So we're expecting some documents to be released, possibly some point in the afternoon after Darren Jones updates MPs after Prime Minister's questions. But I think still questions over what's going to be in these files. There is obviously the live police investigation into Peter Mandelson, which kind of inhibits what the government can release. And there's also considerations around national security as well. So I think the main significance of today is that it just brings up the row of a month ago that really did almost cost the Prime Minister his job.
Alex, in terms of the timeline, is it just today or there's more to come? And I guess in that sense, it's a story that will, often we say, keep on giving, but the opposite, taking from where the Prime Minister wants our attention.
Yes, I think there's some today and then there'll be more. I think he was suggesting, Darren Jones, in the weeks to come ahead. So it's definitely not something that's just going to be tied up today. It's something that's going to drag on, really, and continue to kind of haunt this government, I think.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we'll bring you the latest on Iran, including, of course, the Q&A we've got coming with Professor Michael Clark, on all of your questions about the war.
Welcome back. Well, we're going to start with our Q&A with Michael in just a moment. Just a couple of bits of breaking news. The first one is that oil prices are picking up once again. When we started this morning, we were at about 87 on Brent crude, essentially flat overnight. We're now at 91.50, so up about 4% overnight. Of course, linked to those reports that 3 ships have received projectiles of some form in the Straits of Hormuz. Oil prices back up again, 4.5%. And with that, what you'd expect to happen, the FTSE 100 is down, borrowing costs back up again.
The other bit of news to bring you is the increasing speculation about Mojtaba Khamenei, who, of course, is Iran's new supreme leader, the son of the former supreme leader. There has been some speculation about whether he's been injured because no one's seen him for a little while. And Israel's intelligence assessment, we can tell you, according to a senior Israeli official, is that he was lightly wounded in one of those strikes. That coming in from Reuters, that Israel's assessment is that the supreme leader, the new supreme leader, lightly wounded in the war.
Right, Michael Clark is here. We are delighted to take your questions. Michael, good morning again.
Morning.
Good to see you. So let's get into these questions, which I think we've got made up so we can have a look. The first one comes from Marie. Is that matching up with what I'm about to read? I'll start reading it. Hopefully it will. It seems that Hormuz is probably the most powerful weapon Iran holds and currently being deployed to great effect. Do you think that our allies taking control of Hormuz could provide a pathway to negotiation?
Well, Marie, you're absolutely right. Hormuz is the best thing the Iranians can do tactically because they can keep the straits effectively closed just by making them dangerous. And the Americans at the moment are trying to take out the Iranian mine-laying capacity. They've hit a number of mining ships, they've hit some of the mining stores. But all the Iranians have to keep on doing is making the straits dangerous. And they can do that in lots of different ways, with drones, with shore-based craft, with robot craft, with just attacks on shipping that go through, as we're seeing today. So that keeps it closed. Can it be reopened? Well, yes, it can, but only with quite a lot of military effort, and the Americans say that they look as if they will make that effort, but that draws them in to what I think the Iranians will want, which is a battle low down and dirty in the Strait of Hormuz. That gives the Iranians their best chance of hitting it lucky, of creating some damage, of making it seem that the world is dependent on their goodwill. Now, could the Allies take control? Well, the Iranians are never going to agree on the Strait of Hormuz until somehow this war finishes in a way that they regard as a moral victory. I think that's what they would do. But the French are already talking about, President Macron was talking about putting together a European force to keep the straits open. I mean, that's a bit of a negotiating ploy at the moment. And interestingly, the British have nothing to offer. We had the 9th Mine Countermeasure Squadron. It's sitting in Bahrain for years. 4 ships, the Bangor, the Chiddingford, the Middleton, the Brocklesby, they've all gone. The Middleton was the last to go this week. Taken off on the...
Where are they?
Gone back to Portsmouth. They've all been laid off. And the Middleton didn't even sail home. He came home on the back of a freighter. It's back in Portsmouth now. And that's it. The one time when our 9th Mine Countermeasure Squadron, which has done useful work over the years, might have made a big strategic contribution, it's gone. I mean, the Royal Navy is having a bad war, let's say. I mean, whatever's happening to British defence policy, the Navy is, everything that happens is more bad news for the Navy, sadly.
We've got to get you on next time we've got a defence minister in the studio. I'm actually serious.
I would love to.
Can we try and do that? Can we do that? Let's try and make that
I'm very
happen.
sympathetic. I'm very sympathetic to the
If you're watching Defence Secretary, we won't do it. Promise.
Yeah. The other question I wanted to ask, and this has come in quite a lot, actually, is about nuclear weapons, because I think people are worried, frankly, because several of these nations who've been drawn into this conduct have got them. This is a question from Aldo, who says, given the unpredictability of Donald Trump, is there a chance he would use one or more tactical nuclear weapons to force the Iranian regime to surrender?
No. I mean, he is very unpredictable. But, you know, more than most American presidents, he's really worried about nuclear weapons. It goes back many, many years. One of the reasons that he is as frightened of Putin as he is, I mean, he likes Putin. He actually likes him as a person, but he's also frightened of him on a number of grounds. But one of the reasons he's frightened of him is that he believes that Putin is mad enough to use a nuclear weapon. sooner or later. Now, I think that's wrong, but nevertheless, that's what Donald Trump thinks. So I think there's no chance of that. And, I mean, if in some sort of Hollywood scenario he went completely doolally and decided to use a nuclear weapon, what could you do with it other than shock the world into becoming the greatest criminal of the 21st century? That's what you would be. Whoever breaks the nuclear taboo, which has been very strong since 1945, it will be broken at some point, but whoever breaks it will go down as the greatest criminal in modern history. And, you know, even President Trump doesn't want to do that. So I don't think there's any chance.
OK, next question comes from Paul. The Type 45 destroyer is the only weapon the UK has to take down ballistic missiles. Now it's been deployed to Cyprus. Does this leave the UK totally exposed to a ballistic missile attack?
Certainly does. Yeah, we always are. We've always been exposed to ballistic missile attack, because all we've got against it is the 6 Type 45s that we've got, of which only 3 are capable at the moment, and 2 of those have gone back for more maintenance work. So we've got 1. We've got the Dragon, and it's got very capable missiles. It's called the Sea Viper system, which fires Aster missiles, which are very good, and they can engage lots of targets. They can fire something like more than 1 missile a second, something like 8 missiles in 10 seconds, and they can distinguish between different targets. They are capable of bringing down a ballistic missile. But if we were to defend the UK with them, we'd need 20 or 30 of them around the coast, not 6 with one available at the moment. Again, it's a lousy war for the Navy, this. So the Dragon's a very good ship. I mean, it's on its way. It'll be there in 6-7 days, maybe. It depends if it stops in Gibraltar for more ammunition. We keep most of the missiles in Gibraltar, incidentally, the Aster missiles. When we had ships in the Red Sea, every time they ran out of Aster missiles, they had to go back to Gibraltar to restock and come back. I mean, it's ridiculous, but there you are.
Just a follow-up to that, one of the other questions from Janet about the weapons RF Typhoon's using to down the drones and what the cost of it, how much does it... How much are we spending?
They vary. Most Typhoons in an air-to-air role, so it's like air combat, they've got 8. They can take 8 missiles, and normally they'd have 4 and 4. They'd have 4 medium range, 4 short range, and the medium range, the really good ones, the ones that they're beyond visual range, the radar controlled, those are called the Meteor, and there's the AIM 120, and the published cost of a Meteor is about $2 million a go. Now, that varies according to how many you buy, but if you look on public available sites, it's say about $2 million a missile. Wow, there you go. And so every Typhoon will take off with maybe 4 Meteors, 4 short range, maybe Sidewinders. So a 4 and 4 would normally be a loading. But in this case, where they're after drones, maybe they take all 8, because with AMRAAMs or ASRAAMs, the shorter range ones, the Iris-T, they're called the short range, they might do. And the Typhoon also has a cannon. It has a Second World War style cannon, 1 cannon under the starboard wing, very powerful 27mm German cannon. So if the pilots got close enough to drones, which you can, you're not talking here about other pilots, playing games beyond visual range. If they get close enough to drones, they could fire a cannon, have real fun with it. Yeah. Real Second World War stuff.
A cannon being like a machine gun?
Yeah, it is. It's a machine gun. It takes it's only about 150 rounds, so it's like 3 seconds of fire or 4 seconds of fire. But it's 27mm is very powerful. Yeah. And so if they get close enough, they could just fire a cannon into it. There's lots of controversy over whether you need a Second World War-style weapon on a very modern aircraft, but it's there, and it gets used occasionally, very occasionally.
Machine gun is the official word for...
I've got like a pirate ship in my head with the kind of like lighting the fuse, but it's probably not that.
The fuse, yeah. No, a cannon, they're cannons. It fires cannon shells, but it's like a machine gun.
The next one's from Jovan, who says, I know it's perhaps a difficult question to answer, but due to your observations, will the war be over by May?
Yes. I believe it will, but if it isn't, then the Americans will have lost control of it completely. So if this is not over by May, then the thing is going horizontal. Then it's become a bigger war. It will be Trump's Vietnam. However long it lasts, people call it Trump's Vietnam because it will have drawn the Americans into a more consistent process of beating Iran, and it's not changing. Nothing's changing. The Iranian Revolution is still alive and well.
But that's pretty optimistic. That, I mean, May's obviously quite a long way away, but that you're that confident it will wind up by then.
Well, because I believe, I'm sticking my neck out, but I believe President Trump will declare victory and leave at some point when he feels he's achieved enough that he can talk about he will just go because the costs will increase. And if we're still going in May, which is, what are we on, March? April, May, yeah. If we're going another 6 to 8 weeks, then this war will be very serious in terms of the world economy, and there'll be American losses by then, and the American economy, well, which is feeling it less than everybody else. The American economy is more insulated from the effects than European or Asian economies, but the American economy will start feeling it quite badly, I believe, by then.
By the way, we've just been told that you've crashed the WhatsApp because we've had so many questions in.
I've crashed the WhatsApp?
You've crashed the WhatsApp.
Of all the things I've crashed,
it just shows how, you know, how many people want to, how many people
the amount of abuse out there, you wouldn't believe it, would you?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
The amount of criticism, oh dear.
One person who did manage to get through was Tracy, before it all fell over. Tracy said, how will the new appointment of a leader for Iran affect the tactics and willingness of Iran to prolong the war against the US and Israel?
Good question, Tracy. It's not obvious that Muqtada Khamenei is in any way a pragmatist. I mean, he was his father's son, so, you know, the 86-year-old Khamenei has been replaced by a 56-year-old Khamenei. And given that his father was as old as he was, and we know that the son was close to him, he was probably making a lot of decisions. And the interesting thing that you mentioned before, Sophie, that maybe he's injured. Well, he might be dead. But until the Israelis and the Americans can prove that he's dead, then he's alive. That's all. He's like Schroeder's cat, you know, in the box. He's either dead or alive. I mean, if he's not obviously dead, then he is alive, however injured he is. And if he dies now, then nobody will say he's dead until it's in some way proven.
It's like the tree falling down in the woods, almost like the whole, you know, if a tree falls down the woods but no one sees it.
Exactly, exactly. So unless somebody can prove that he's dead, then he is alive, politically. Is alive. And I don't the tactics are pretty clear now, the Iranian tactics. They may not work, but the tactics are clear to proliferate the war horizontally, to make it go sideways. And the Iranians are now saying the Israelis bombed a banking centre, which they said was part of the IRGC financial system, which I'm sure it probably was. And the Iranians are saying, right, we'll bomb banking centres now. So they'll extend it in reciprocal ways. Now, what they've got to offer in terms of missiles and drones, we still don't quite know. But I think, you know, the Americans say they're losing their ability to launch. I think they're holding stuff back. And given that we know they've got tens of thousands of drones, they can keep launching drones, even if they don't get through to banking centres, if that's what their next set of targets is, and it will cause uncertainty.
Just related to that, are there any signs of sub-factions in Iran softening and wanting to, I don't know, break away from the regime?
Yeah, well, not that I'm aware of. I mean, you've got to look at the leadership. Pezeshkian, the president, is thought to be much more pragmatic. But Larijani is now I mean, he's a hardliner, and he's become more hardline. He seems to be leading the political response, actually. And I think he's digging in. And there's no evidence that others, I mean, Rafsanjani, for instance, they don't seem to have enough influence that we can see. So at the moment, I mean, you may be right, there may be factions developing, but it's not clear to me, the stuff that I look at, that they're in any way prominent. And this rally around the flag element that you get whenever a country is attacked is really quite powerful. And, you know, the IRGC can turn out demonstrations on a daily basis in favour of the government, which is what they're doing.
Alex has written in about why the US don't just control the Strait of Hormuz, which I think is, you probably touched on that earlier, didn't you? Why wasn't this part of the US plan? But I guess, does that go to a wider question about how prepared the US was in gaming out these different scenarios?
Well, they get, I mean, CENTCOM, Central Command sitting in Doha, they've gamed this out many, many times, as have the British. What would we do if the Strait of Hormuz was closed? There's lots of ideas. And it's not difficult to know what you would do. You can do it, for sure. But it costs, it takes time, and you run the risk of losses. So what they'd have to do, remember the Red Sea, the area of the Red Sea that was protected from the Houthis was about 50 miles of dangerous water. Now, it's 4 times that. It's 200 miles of dangerous water. And so the way to control it means that you've got to have a gun line of ships facing the Iranian coast, so a gun line of destroyers. And then you need aircraft that are attacking anything on the coast. And then you need maybe a convoy system to protect tankers going through. There's said to be now 330-odd tankers waiting to get through either way. And that's quite difficult. So it can be done, but it needs a lot of effort. And you've got to present targets which the Iranians can then have a go at. But a gun line of ships You can't just have a box. In the Red Sea, they had a box, and it was a box 50 miles long, and that was OK. 200 miles box is too big. So you've got to have a line of defences and active defences.
Michael, great stuff. Thank you so much. We didn't get to